Hello and welcome to the Global Journalism Seminars at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism. I'm Caitlin Moser and we're turning our attention to sports journalism today. This Sunday at 4 p.m. UK time, the 22nd FIFA World Cup kicks off in Qatar. The tournament will be attended by 32 national football teams, watched by 1 million live spectators, and typically draws a global TV audience of over 3 billion people. And coverage of those 64 matches will be provided by the 12,300 journalists who've been accredited by FIFA this year to work on the ground. Plus, a vast army of commentators and support staff will be working on these stories from war rooms back home too. Among those covering will be Chris McHardy, who is head of sport at the Arabian news network in neighboring UAE. I chose Chris for today's seminar very specifically for a number of reasons. Firstly, for his unique perspective as a Scottish-born sports journalist who's lived in the region since 2010. He understands the pressures and expectations of both sides. Secondly, I literally have never met anyone more passionate or knowledgeable about football. And thirdly, because he's one of the hardest working sports journalists I've had the pleasure of sharing a newsroom with. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Humbled by those lovely words. And the 10 dirhams, as they say over here, is in the post.
Put it in the post. So you're about to start working very hard and not stop for a very long time.
Yeah, I think Christmas Day, is the next day off over in these parts. Of course, living in the UAE, you've got the small matter of the FIFA World Cup, which, of course, as you've already alluded to, kicks off on Sunday. For you golfing aficionados, enthusiasts, you've got the DP World Tour Championship. It kicks off tomorrow, or tees off, should I say, tomorrow. Etihad Airways, Abu Dhabi Formula One Grand Prix this weekend as well, Caitlin. So, yeah, an awful lot going on.
Busy. And you're going to be reporting on this FIFA World Cup?
Of course, yeah, of course. We're going to be in and out of Doha, based here in the United Arab Emirates, but in and out. I've got a couple of group matches. I'll be across for a couple of the knockout matches, and then all being well, both semi-finals. And then the final, of course, the culmination of the 22nd edition comes Sunday, December 18th.
Wow. Accreditation this year seems to be vexed. There were 16,000 reporters accredited when the World Cup was in Russia, only 12,300 this year. That's a 23% decrease. So have you had trouble yourself getting accredited? Have you heard?
Yeah, I've been thinking long and hard about this. I think that there's no doubt that the pandemic has had an impact. I know a number of entities, publications have scaled back. I think that may play a part. I think, the money that's swashing around now is a bit different. People have maybe realigned their strategy around covering the World Cup based on that. I think that undoubtedly will have played a part. And yes, the short answer is I had a bit of trouble. You go through the FIFA portal and very quickly you're welcomed with rights holder or non-rights holder. And of course, working for the Arabian Radio Network over here in the UAE, sadly, we're a non-rights holder, which then it becomes a little bit more convoluted and a little bit more difficult to gain the access that kind of warrants the cost. I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on the cost of being over there in Qatar. The hotel rooms are astronomical. I've been speaking to one or two of my peers over here in the UAE, and it's a small fortune to pitch up there for the month to cover the World Cup. So I think there are a number of mitigating factors. Being a non-right holder as we are, the Arabian Radio Network has ensured that we're a little bit more satellite. We'll be in and out. We're going to be covering it. Of course we will. We're a major network over here in this part of the world. We'll be covering it, but we'll be covering it a little bit differently than perhaps I maybe foolishly or naively thought we would maybe 12 months, 18 months ago.
Yeah. For those who don't understand, what does a rights holder versus a non-rights holder mean?
So essentially, a lot of money has been spent to ensure, again, take the case of beIN Sports, Qatari based. They are the major Middle Eastern entity when it comes to a TV perspective. Two men that I'm sure a lot of the viewers today will know, Richard Keys and Andy Gray, will be helming the beIN Sports English offering. They've got a huge Arab team as well. And then you've got the likes of the BBC and the ITV in the UK, where huge sums of money money have been parted with to ensure that they are front and centre of the coverage. So little old us here at the Arabian Radio Network, whilst yes, our pockets are deep to a point, they're not quite deep enough to satisfy the wants and the desires of Gianni Infantino.
Fair enough. Who manages the accreditation process?
FIFA directly. That was one thing that initially I was going through back channels with some of my contacts in Qatar for the Supreme Committee, of course, the organisers of this World Cup on the ground. And you'll find that they are responsible for a number of things, vast majority of things, putting on the World Cup, building the football stadia. But when it comes to accreditation, it's FIFA that likes to keep their hands on the rein, their hands on the rein, should I say. So yes, you go through the FIFA portal. Initially, you think it's going to be easy, but yeah, you need a patience of a saint to get it done. And and if you do that and you check all the balances, that you match their criteria, then you can become accredited and you can sample the football festival that is the World Cup.
And then there's only the small matter of trying to find an available room.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've all seen the pictures today. I mean, yeah, the idea of a tent with basic amenities, it's not very flattering for Qatar today, some of those reports. And then, of course, I've got other friends and who are safely into hotels and they say that the staff haven't been nicer, they can be more kind of welcoming. So you'll always get that. I said it before and I'll say it again, every World Cup, every major sporting event, I can think of a litany of Olympic Games that have had teething problems at the beginning, and that will be no different, I'm sure, for this World Cup upcoming.
Yeah, it's worth saying this isn't your first World Cup, is it? You've covered multiple international.
Yeah, Brazil 2014, and then Russia in 2018. So this will be third time lucky. Will hopefully, all being well, be at the World Cup final, which is third time lucky. I missed it on the previous two occasions. But yeah, we've gone from South America to Russia, obviously Europe, and now for the first time ever here in the Middle East.
Yeah. I want to play a video of I'm sure you've seen it, but of an incident that unfolded live on Danish TV last night. Give me 1 second to make this happen. Here we go.
A Danish journalist, Rasmus Tandholt, who's working for T2 out here, he was live on air last night when this happened.
Slat, der jo altså bliver udsat for en hel del kritik. Hvordan oplever du forholdene lige nu?
Jamen, vi kan vise, hvordan forholdene er lige her, hvis vi drejer kameraet. We are live on Danish television, og der kan I se, nu bliver vi stoppet med at filme, og det er forholdene her. Mister, you invited the whole world you invited the whole world to come here. Why can't we film? It's a public place. This is the accreditation. Okay. We can film anywhere we want. Okay. There are only, of course,
only for the Qatar. Because the Qatar is
no, we don't need permit. But you can break the camera. You want to break the camera? Okay, you break the camera. Okay. So you're threatening us by smashing the camera.
Ouch.
So that clearly was a bit of an unsavoury incident.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the pictures don't look good, do they? Let's be honest about it. However, I saw that today. I read the story. I've read a number of articles, Caitlin, on this subject, and I've been in that position before. You know, I've got to be honest about the kind of sensitivities over in this part of the world. And listen, there are sensitivities in all parts of the world. You know, you can't, for example, in any international airport, you can film in certain areas. And whilst, yes, that journalist in question, Rasmus, did have the accreditation, it was a public place. To my knowledge, there was no security breach in him filming there. But I think it's important to point out that just the other week here in the United Arab Emirates, we were filming our own segment for our own World Cup coverage in a very similar situation to that. A security card came. He asked for the correct permits, etc. And we had them. He was a little unsure. He had to take them away. And I think it comes down to communication. That's one thing. That's not an isolated incident. I've seen instances of that in the past whereby communication from the top down. I'm not aware of the nationality of the security guard in question. Undoubtedly, the two men there in the Candoras, I think, are Qatari. I'm taking a bit of a leap there, but I think it comes down to communication. I don't think that is indicative of what we'll see. I think that is more a communication, and I'm not sitting here being an apologist. I see that as more being a communication error, whereby perhaps before the World Cup, any individual filming in that area couldn't. the message hasn't cascaded down. An overzealous security guard or individual or an official in that instance has jumped in, and I do see that, and I know the journalist in question has received an apology from the Qatari Supreme Committee, thankfully, and we don't want to see journalist cameras and equipment being broken. And I do feel that those will be pockets of instances. I think it will be, and I think now after that incident, I think the Supreme Committee, again, their messaging will be to ensure, listen, for these 4 weeks, filming in these designated areas are allowed. Please communicate that down the scale, down the pyramid to those security guards to allow the journalists to do their job.
What would you do in that situation?
Always be respectful. That's the way that my mum brought me up, regardless. Doesn't matter whether I'm in Qatar, whether I'm in Dubai or anywhere else in the world. You state your case, you've got your credentials. Patience is a virtue as well, guys. And I know it's difficult at times where you're trying to do your job. I mean, in that instance, Rasmus is live, for goodness sake. So there's a bit of professional embarrassment there, but you've just got to be respectful. You've got to state your case, and ultimately it will get sorted. You can bet your life that, the Qataris are, they're mindful that this has been beamed all around the world, that their reputation is at stake, and they want to show themselves as a welcoming nation. My experiences of going to Qatar is exactly that they are a welcoming nation. Therefore, yeah, I think always, and again, doesn't matter. I go back to it, Caitlin, doesn't matter if you're in your homeland of South Africa, if you're in the northeast of Scotland, and Scotland can be a very welcoming place, as I know, or whether you're in the Middle East. Always be respectful, have a modicum of patience, and fingers crossed your issue will be sorted.
What are some of the other mistakes that journalists who are used to a certain level of accommodation in the West could make?
Yeah, I mean, the obvious one, and is arriving in these parts with preconceived notions. Again, as I've always said, and it's funny, I did an interview with Zlatan Ibrahimovic the other day, and we were talking about Arab culture, etc. And he was saying that his experience of it has been an incredibly warm one. And I think you've got to leave those kind of preconceived ideas at the door. Judge the country, judge its people on merits. I come here and report, and listen, I don't want to sit here and try and sugarcoat it. If you have a bad experience, it's your right to report that it's a bad experience, but give the people a chance. Come here and really be open to having your mind kind of changed, or maybe that's the wrong word, but at least being open to seeing exactly what the country and this region has to offer. It is culture rich. And my experiences of many of the people have been incredibly warm and incredibly accommodating, and the hospitality is second to none, in certain venues, etc. as well. So yeah, that would be the first port of call. And then, if you are like me and you enjoy an adult beverage here and there, and you work hard for your craft, at the end of the night, just take the foot off the accelerator a little bit. Enjoy yourself, but just be mindful of where you are, and make sure you've got a proper route home, and you're sensible in these parts.
Yeah, fair. Eat a meal before you hit the pub.
Yeah, I think line the stomach, as we would say. Indeed, any lightweights, as we would say up in the northeast of Scotland. Just take care would be the message.
Yeah. You mentioned culture there, and something reporters from outside of the region might not grasp the importance of is saving face. And the culture of saving face, Hafzwa al-Maj, probably butchered that pronunciation. In other words, preserving dignity. Is there a backlash that reporters need to be aware of when it comes to shaming Qataris? Is that something you need to keep in mind, or do you just go ahead and do your job to the
I think ultimately the Qataris know that they're welcoming the biggest sporting event on the planet, the biggest event on the planet to their shores. So, you're absolutely right to state that saving face is something, the kind of Qataris, and same here with the United Arab Emirates, Arabs in general, they are proud people, to go into their house and start casting aspersions or being overly critical or overly negative. If you're not backing it up, opinion's one thing, but back it up with fact as well. So, listen, the Qataris will know that, and they're aware of it. We've been building up to this World Cup since Sepp Blatter back in November 2010 read out and the winners are Qatar. The Qataris have been dealing with negativity for a whole host of issues that I'm sure we'll touch on later on in this webinar. So they're not stupid. They know that people will be coming here with their agendas. You know, there will be a number of journalists who will have a flea in their ear from their editors. Some will be seeking out negativity, but I'd like to think, by and large, it's the positive stories. You know, again, and I'm sure we'll touch on it. You know, football in this World Cup can be a vehicle for genuine change, can be a vehicle to at least evoke conversation around change. And I know we'll touch on this, Caitlin, but you know, it's the old cliche, isn't it? You know, you're not going to revolutionize. You're going to change the world overnight. But if we can have conversation, if we can have discourse, then we're on we're on the right path.
Well, I mean, let's not tiptoe around it anymore. Let's go straight there. There are very real issues around rights, workers' rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, that people are concerned about. People from progressive countries, they want to see these addressed and redressed in Qatar. And I think I'd like to go into this conversation with a little clip from. You're a Manchester United person.
I'm a Man United fan. I think it's Jurgen Klopp, the Liverpool boss you've got.
Jurgen Klopp, yeah. Is this your mortal enemy? I'm not.
Well, no, I've spent a bit of time with Jurgen. He's a lovely man. He's passionate. He's enthusiastic, and he's done an incredible job for Liverpool Football Club. And I think the clip that you're about to play, we'll discuss it afterwards. Well, let's play it now and see what.
Here's some of that passion. Here we go.
Will you go to the World Cup? No. Are you as enthused about this? No. To the World Cup as you would normally be? No. It's different. I mean, it has nothing to do with Qatar, that they won the World Cup and it's there. That in the moment when you put it there, it was all the things which followed up was clear. There was not one stadium in Qatar, or maybe one, and so they have to build a stadium, and that nobody thought about that. I don't think everybody mentioned that day. That's the situation. That what just can make you angry. How can you not? Again, I watch it from a football point of view, and I don't like the fact that now players from time to time get in a situation where they have now to send a message. You are all journalists. You should have sent a message. We didn't write the most critical article about it, and not about because it's Qatar and things. No, about the circumstances, which was clear. Let them just play the games, the players and the managers, and don't put Gareth Southgate constantly in a situation where he has to talk about everything. He's not like, I'm not a politician, he has an opinion, and he's not a politician. He's saying Klopp said and Southgate said and all these kind of things, as if it would change anything. We all, you more than I, let it happen 12 years ago. Now making a story of it now when it's happened, now coming out the corner and getting now players under pressure, what you will do. With questioning these kind of things, with asking the questions, with asking Harry Kane, will you wear it? Harry Kane says he will wear it. The other guys say, please don't make political statements. That's not okay. We all let it happen. That time, it was everything on the table. Everything was on the table.
Is that fair? Did we do a bad job?
In a word, no. I took, and there'll be people smiling at this thinking, yeah, typical Man United fan having a popular Jurgen, but I did. I think that was, he besmirched a lot of good people in those comments about we, the journalists, and of course I'm part of the fraternity, we didn't do enough. I think that flies in the eye of a lot of journalists who did, and you know, I can remember it as if it was yesterday. You know, the corruption around, alleged corruption, proven corruption around the bidding process. There was a lot of good men and women in the journalism field who wrote articles. There was a lot of people early on highlighting, you know, the human rights issues. And for Jurgen to sit there and say that we, as if the journalists are the custodians of this decision, that we allowed it to happen. No, that left a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, in all honesty. And he's got a point. Jurgen Klopp himself can't engender change. You know, he's a football manager at the end of the day. But as soon as Sepp, and I go back to Sepp because he's been making headlines in the last fortnight, I find it remarkable that he's come out now to say it was a mistake. He was quiet, was old Sepp, for the last 11, 12 years. And then a couple of weeks out from the tournament, he says it was a mistake. And the fact of the matter is those issues were highlighted. There was a huge storm around the decision to award the World Cup to Qatar, not just because of those rights that you've and the issues that you've raised. Of course, it was a summer World Cup originally. It was never intended to be a winter World Cup. 50 degrees in this part of the world in the summer. I mean, it's ridiculous. So for Jurgen to say it's the journalist's fault that they, in some way, shape, or form, kind of helped, aided the awarding of the FIFA World Cup to Qatar, I think is bang out of line. As I say, I go back to it. Some real good people wrote articles highlighting this. Fortunately, though, Caitlin, the horse had bolted. The money was paid. The deal was done, and Qatar were always going to host this FIFA World Cup.
The money was paid is interesting. What about Jurgen's comments about saying journalists shouldn't be asking players to respond? Or managers?
Again, I think that to a point he's got one. What can change now? Gareth Southgate is now trying to, and I use Gareth, the England manager, as an example, as Jurgen used. Gareth's job now, they're there. They've touched down, have England, as the majority of nations have. The job now, as Gareth Southgate, as a football manager, the job now as players is to win football matches. And again, it will be up to the players. I've always believed this. Some players, some sportsmen and women want to be front and centre of social movements, cultural movements, call them what you will. Others just want to do their day job and will kind of have their own counsel on certain views, etc. So he's got a point, but ultimately, again, it's what I said a little earlier, Caitlin, it comes down to the editorial, whatever the strategy is. There'll be journalists who are like dogs with bones, and I mean that with the greatest of respects. They're doing their jobs. They will want to get those kind of lines out of the players, and there'll be other journalists who will want to focus on the football. My experience of past World Cups, I often find, you can agree with this or not, when the first whistle blows, all the noise does quieten down a little bit. The narrative, the show begins. And then, of course, the storylines are then permeated. The storylines are written with the football on the pitch, and invariably, and that's the same across Olympic Games. It's the same certainly for FIFA World Cups. It isn't new, Caitlin, and I've said this to a lot of people. The issues with which we're talking about, okay, there are a lot of rights issues. The teething problems heading into a World Cup, they're not new. We saw them ahead of Russia. We saw them ahead of Brazil. The same, of course, your home nation of South Africa. There are issues that are highlighted. It's great for discussion, to evoke and engender conversation. That's what we want as journalists. We want to make people see clearly and make people think differently, and that won't change. And again, as I say, when the action begins, you'll start to see the storylines and the narratives changing.
If you had an interview with Jurgen Klopp today, would you ask the question?
That question being?
Is it right that
would I ask her about his comments for the journalists? Would I hold him to task?
His comments about Qatar being the host, his opinions, his political opinions.
Yeah, I mean, if Jurgen was sat, and again I go back to, I've spoken to Jurgen a couple of times, and I think more than anything, I think now that the Football World Cup is kicking off, if Jurgen was in front of me, I'd more take him to task with his viewpoint as to why he feels that the journalists needed to do more. I'd probably dig around more on that front more than anything else, because Jurgen's answer to me is, listen, Chris, it doesn't matter what my views are, my political views, whatever views it is, this World Cup is happening. For Jurgen, it's up to him whether he wants to be a headline grabber. He's a manager of Liverpool Football Club. He knows what he says. There's a lot of people that, looking on and wanting to hear what he has to say, but it would all depend on what mood he's in. And for me, I think the issue there is, I think Jurgen, pretty clear in that Sky Sports clip, I think it was a 6.5-minute clip, he made it clear he is not in favour of the FIFA World Cup being in Qatar for a litany of reasons. Yeah. So I think that in many respects, he's gone on record. I think the biggest thing for me is holding him to account on the criticism of us, the journalists. And I go back to it. I think we've all done the very best that we possibly can to highlight those issues. That's all we can do. It's up to governments and policy makers to drive that change through.
If we turn our attention to FIFA, who made the decision, first Russia, now Qatar, are they profiteering from sports watching?
Yeah, I mean, it's the elephant in the room. If they are, and I'll be diplomatic here a little bit, if they are, then they're not alone in that, Caitlin. If we see so many sports, and whether they're taking their lead from governments, and I appreciate when I move into that territory, we're talking diplomacy. It's perhaps a little bit different than entertainment entities. And let's be frank, sport is a game. It's entertainment at the end of the day. But a lot of these sports take their lead from, again, I go back to governments and policymakers. And there is a saying: if it's good enough for them, then we are under that umbrella. It's good enough for us. And in the case of FIFA, I know it kind of governs itself. It doesn't really have borders. Of course, it's got its headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland, but they're not alone, Caitlin. We've seen Formula One profit. We've seen boxing. I mean, it doesn't take long to do a bit of research on all of these sports to see that, yeah, a lot of them will go into countries that have, understandably, they have issues that have been well documented raised, and they will look to profit from those. That's the most, I guess, succinctly I can put it. And I come back to the point that, and I'm sure the powers that be of these sports would say, listen, if the government is, doing business and involved in that manner, then that opens the gates for us to do likewise. It's interesting enough, I actually hosted the Sports Industry Forum here in Abu Dhabi, both yesterday and today, and I had a long conversation with Richard Scudamore, former CEO and chairman of the Premier League, a role that he held for almost 20 years. And we were talking about the fit and proper persons test. The Premier League doing its due diligence when clubs are sold to entities around the world. And he was making the point that, yes, they have that criteria. They have that criteria, proof of funds, making sure you can prove you are who you say you are. And of course, one of the other key checkpoints in that is you get the seal of approval from government, heads of state, people who are employed to govern a country. And he was making the point that in many respects, if that's getting a tick in the box, then it's not open season per se. But if the government are saying yes to it, then I think when we hold these sporting entities to a higher order, those questions, sometimes I do believe that we've got to shift that focus and say, well, listen, okay, we go to the governments of these countries and say, listen, what are you doing more of to highlight these issues?
In terms of winning hearts and minds in your region, and promoting change, is it happening?
It is. It really, really is. We are living in an incredibly, the digital age is here. It's been here for a while, in all honesty. The proliferation of social media channels. Again, I referenced someone I was talking to in the last couple of days. There's a lot of people I have been speaking to. A lady by the name of Shema Al Husseini, who is part of the Saudi For All Federation. And she was a wonderful, wonderful orator. And she's very passionate about the growth of sport in Saudi Arabia. And she was making the point that 75% of the Saudi population is 35 and under, I believe it is. It's a increasingly younger demographic, a younger population. And, they are on social media. They are consuming not just Western world ideals and whether it be music or film or what have you. They're taking in all different types of material, and there is change in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We know their 2030 vision is well documented. Over in here in the United Arab Emirates, and where I am right now in Abu Dhabi, there's the Sports Vision 2040. There is change. You can make no mistake about that, whether that's equality, whether that's for women, women's rights, and women getting more opportunities in sport. Shema was actually talking about the fact that CrossFit, hugely popular among the female population in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and I'm using that as the example first and foremost. And changes, there are elements and there are areas in society where those changes are glacier-like. Some of those changes are incremental. And I've witnessed it with my own eyes. There are some, and I would say certainly in the United Arab Emirates, the majority of changes that they're happening rapidly. Anyone who's been to this part of the world will know that there's a lot of females, for example, now making up boards, sporting or otherwise. And I think, there's no doubt in my mind, and it's the same with Qatar as well. I've spoken to a lot of females from Saudi Arabia who now hold some real key decision-making positions in their country, and they speak with so much passion that, listen, we're not going to change this. For anyone on this webinar thinking that change will be like a light switch, no, it's going to take a lot of conversation, absolutely, on that front. It's going to be a lot of evolution. There are educational aspects to it as well. This is a slow burn. It is. I can't say it any other way. It is a slow burn. But from my own eyes, from my own experiences, perhaps not happening as quick as some liberals and some would like, but change is happening. Make no mistake about it.
Is football a vehicle for change?
Yeah, ultimately, yes. Sport it's the unifier. Again, I referenced Richard Scudamore. It feels like I'm turning into Richard, but he's someone I look up to, and he's been there and done it when it comes to the highest level of football. And he said, it was a beautiful line: sport and music. They're the only two things in a lot of ways that collapse borders. They collapse, your creed, your religion, your whatever you're from, whatever you believe in. Sport is the unifier, and football. There are proofs of concepts. Football can be a good vehicle for change if it's used properly, and again, if it's bringing people together, bringing people together with healthy conversation. And I think that's what it will do. Anyone that is heading over to Qatar, and I've asked this of my friends and colleagues as well, is really take the time, seek out Qataris, seek out conversation, listen to what they've got to say. And even if you're not in agreement with some of their ideals or some of their thoughts, listen to them, listen to the why in it all, and have those conversations. And that's what this World Cup can do. There are going to be fans from all around the world heading into Qatar. It brings us together, and it will hopefully lead to open dialogue. And only in doing that can we start to have these conversations, constructive conversations, not saying you're right, I'm wrong, constructive conversations that can lead to a continued period of discussion, analysis, in the hope that we get the change that I think we all, or certainly the majority of us, would like to see.
You mentioned women and increased representation. Are we going to see some of that at this World Cup? I was looking at some stats, and of the accredited journalists in Russia 4 years ago, only 14% were women. What's happening?
I mean, 14%, it's not great, is it? I mean, it's interesting. And again, to give you a bit of personal kind of background to myself, growing up in a single parent household, my mum and my sister, my gran, I'll throw her into the mix as well. I'm very passionate, now a father of two young girls as well, massively championing women's rights in this regard, and 14% of women involved in the reporting in the last World Cup. I want to see that figure up. And again, I use the UK in a lot of ways as the barometer. Of course, I'm from the UK, and the huge strides that have been taken. You just have to look now. You see female lead analysts. I can name check the likes of Karen Carney, Alex Scott. All of these ladies, of course, are well known to certainly our UK viewers, and I appreciate, Kate, when you're based in the UK. You've got pitchside reporters, Melissa Reddy, who is now, I think, chief reporter at Sky Sports News. I go to be in Sports, based over in Qatar. You've got a lady by the name of Carrie Brown. She's based out of London. She's their kind of chief pitchside reporter for the London clubs. You've got a litany of ladies now involved at the coalface, as I like to say, of football, and that's brilliant. And only now, it's interesting, Caitlin, because I think for a long time, females interested in sport would have perhaps looked at it and thought to themselves, is this something I can get into? Now they're seeing females, and beyond that, they're hearing females in the commentary box. They're seeing females analyse games before matches, halftime, full time. And again, it's all about time. It's all about patience. We're going to see that change, and we are seeing it from a UK perspective. I'll come back to that. And I do think, again, I don't have the stats at hand. We'll only maybe get them at the end of this World Cup. I'll make a friendly wager. It has to be a friendly wager. Of course, gambling not allowed in these parts. A friendly wager with you that 14%, we will see an increase in that come the 2022 World Cup. I really do believe that. And again, I go back to the success of the Lionesses, for example, the England Lionesses in football over in the UK. Again, it's allowing young girls not to aspire to be Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, but aspire to be the stars of the female game. And there are many of those. Alex Dugan, you know, I look at someone like Alex Morgan. I'm now talking US, of course, and Megan Rapinoe, etc. So it's, I actually think as a father of a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, I have never been this enthused by female sport in general, and now the proliferation of females in key positions, and not just anchors. You know, there's many great female anchors. I'm talking about females talking about football and analysing football and giving their opinion.
Great. If you do have questions for Chris, you can pop them in WhatsApp or in the Q&A box if you're on the webinar. While we're on the topic of women, I suppose it has to be asked, or although having lived in the region, I hate this question. Will women journalists be safe in Qatar?
Yes, and yes. Listen, again, I can't, that's not the Chris McHardy guarantee, because you can't guarantee anything in life, truly. You know, and I mean that, I know that maybe has elicited a little chuckle, but I kind of mean that sincerely. Like, you know, whether you're in a small village where I'm from, hailing from in the northeast of Scotland, to Qatar, there is inherent dangers. They're everywhere. You can't account for individuals who may or may not decide to harm you. Okay, so let's get that out the way. But yes, and again, I will say to you all, if anyone is on this call heading to Qatar, that will be probably the thing that surprises you most. You know, again, it kind of boggles the minds a little bit that, yes, you've got to be respectful, and you've got to not necessarily cover. You don't have to. I mean, Caitlin, you're in a better position than I am. You don't have to cover your hair and etc. You absolutely don't have to do that. You have to be respectful, but you have to be respectful everywhere that you go. But yes, you're going to be welcomed. Everyone is going to be welcomed. There is no doubt about that. This is a World Cup. Qatar are not doing this for anything other than, you know, they want to be front and center in this, and they want to be front and center in this on all the good things. You know, they don't want every negative connotation associated with them to be highlighted. All, you can bet your life you'll be welcomed. You'll be welcomed, I'm sure, at the airport with a smile. And, you know, from my experiences, my wife's here, my daughters, and I'm talking in the United Arab Emirates, so it's slightly different, but this is one of the safest places on the planet. You know, certainly in the UK 20 years ago, you may have left your front door open at night. Not now. Over in these parts, I'd have no hesitation, and it's happened one too many times for my liking that the front door's left open because, yeah, you know.
You heard it here first, folks. Chris McHardy's door is unlocked.
I'm Scottish though, Caitlin, so there isn't much money sloshing around, I can tell you that.
I just want to have a look and see if we have any questions for you in the room. Frida from Sweden, can we get our camera going downstairs and take the question about sports washing? Here we go.
Hi, Frida.
Give us 1 second to move the camera around. Well done, Brett. And you're on mute.
If I may, before Frida asks this question, I have a love affair with Sweden. My friend actually worked in Östersund, which is about 5.5 hours drive up from Stockholm. So I've done them all. I've done Malmo, I've done Gothenburg, I've done Stockholm. I've done a place called Degerfors as well, Sundsvall and Östersund. So I wonder where Frida's from. She can maybe tell me that before she asks the question.
My own, if we were talking football teams, I would say IFK Gothenburg for me.
Okay.
But I know that there is a really good football story from Östersund about this super small team that raced and played. Who was it? What British team was it they played in?
So Östersund. So my very good friend is Graham Potter, the former manager there, who's now the manager of Chelsea Football Club. Third tier of Swedish football, very quickly. Third tier of Swedish football, took them to the top division, won the Swedish Cup, got to the last 32 of the Europa League. They lost 3-0 to Arsenal in Östersund, a game I was at, and then they beat Arsenal 2-1 in the second leg before bowing out. But a great story. Sorry, you've got a question, Frida. Over to you.
Yeah, and now they're facing very much economic problems back home. But that's another story. My question is about the sports washing that you talked about earlier. And there is actually now a discussion because there has been a recent book coming out in Sweden about ahead of the World Cup from this Swedish journalist Olof Lund, a football journalist, and he's talking about this a lot about the sports washing, and he applies that it is a Western perspective on the World Cup, that that the topic of human rights and the critique about sport washing is mainly raised in Western outlets. Is that something you agree on? So or is it worldwide?
So say that again, just to be clear. I think I got your question. You mentioned there that the idea of sports washing is a Western concept, that no one else is reporting it.
Or in this case, when it comes to Qatar, the question is mainly raised in Western outlets.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt in my mind that that's the case. Again, I'm trying to troll through my memory bank in terms of publications here. Listen, stories are ran. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I think, questions are asked of key individuals. Zlatan, I use your compatriot as a case in point. Questions are asked of him, and he will sidestep some, he'll answer others. But there is no doubt, I think, from a sports washing perspective, the majority of articles, the majority of discussion does come from the Western world. A lot of these countries that we speak of in this region that have been accused of it, they kind of, they'll have to answer questions about it. But in terms of journalists writing about it per se, no, there isn't that much. It does come from a Western standpoint mainly. The questions, certainly when I'm in press conferences, etc., when I'm speaking with these people, it's the Western journalists that are asking about this notion of sports washing. And again, it comes down, I say it all the time, it comes down to the individual. Some individuals will answer it and give their honest opinion. Some will be what I would call respectful of the fact of where they are. If they're being asked these questions in these countries, then it becomes that little bit more difficult perhaps to answer honestly. But it's an interesting notion that's been put forward, and I would probably concur that majority of those kind of articles and kind of documentaries or whatever we're talking about here probably does come from more of a Western world kind of standpoint.
Can we go to Olga from
Hello, thank you, Chris, for this presentation. Yeah, I'm a Ukrainian journalist, and actually I've been to Qatar once. I had a connection flight there, so I spent some hours in Doha, and my impression was that this is not a city for pedestrians, for tourists on budget. So I'm really looking forward to see, will this issue be addressed somehow during the World Cup? Will it be accessible for many people from various countries of the world, also in terms of the infrastructure and everything? But my question is about a different thing. So recently, the FIFA President Gianni Infantino, speaking in Indonesia ahead of the G20 summit, he called for a ceasefire in Ukraine, and he said that, well, during the World Cup, a ceasefire could be implemented. In fact, these calls, in Ukraine were really received with a lot of incomprehension. Like, why did he have to say that? Because the ceasefire is not something that Ukraine is seeking at the moment, because it doesn't benefit Ukraine at the moment. It's actually Russia that would benefit from a ceasefire, as it is losing on the battlefield. So my question is, what do you think of this cause? Why would Infantino go into this political things, comment on war, especially considering also his relationship with Russia, that he had an award from dictator Putin some years ago?
Yeah, simply put, thank you for your question. I mean, I think it will come as no surprise that you probably saw me shaking my head there. I mean, he's made light of the situation in that part of the world. He's done that in a way, it seems almost like a sales pitch, asking for a ceasefire to avert your gaze to the FIFA World Cup. So what? So that the coffers of FIFA and their stats at the end of this World Cup in terms of figures watching it, it's out of place, it's out of kilter. And Gianni, like the majority of FIFA, certainly Sepp's era and UEFA with Michel Platini, they do have a habit of putting their foot in it, more often than not. Again, Gianni's job isn't as a politician. I appreciate the role as president of FIFA. It's not an easy one. I'm sure it isn't an easy one. I've never actually had the pleasure of actually sitting down and having a conversation with Gianni. But that seems insensitive at best. I actually never saw that comment, so thank you for highlighting it. But that's not his role. His role is to be the figure for football. I mean, again, I would, if I was advising Gianni Infantino, I would not be getting involved in any situation political. He is there to, he's the custodian of football. FIFA is the governing body of the world game. And yeah, that comment kind of sticks in the throat a little bit. So on behalf of Gianni, yeah, I apologise because it's very insensitive indeed.
Let's stay with Gianni for a second. He's been calling for a World Cup every 2 years. Do you think that's going to happen?
Nope. This is a rotten idea. The fact that Arsene Wenger, who is FIFA's head of global development, I mean, someone give that man a job. I'm being serious here. If anyone needs a gardener, get Arsene Wenger's number. The man is losing the plot. Le Professeur, as he was known at Arsenal. Yeah, I've not come across a footballer, Caitlin, either current or past, that believes it's a good idea. Again, I'm name dropping a little bit here, but Zlatan, again, I was on stage with him on Sunday night. Clarence Seedorf earlier this week, two legends of the game, and they just cut me down. I hadn't even finished the question, and they said, nope, stop right there. We are not robots. We are human beings. We have families. We are... you are running us into the ground for what at the end of the day? FIFA may well dress itself up as non-for-profit, but fine well that they and Gianni flips through the dollar bills at the end of this World Cup. There's no doubt about that. And yeah, we have to be mindful of this. And Pep Guardiola, who was over in these parts at the start of the year with Expo 2020 down in Dubai, and I had a long conversation with him about this as well. And, he makes the point that we journalists, we're desensitized sometimes to the fact that football players are human beings. They have emotions like you and I. They have families. They have arguments. They have disagreements with their wife or their children. They have, it sounds a bit morbid, but, death in the family. And yet we expect from them every Saturday, every Wednesday night when it comes to the Champions League, a certain level of performance. And if they drop below that, we're at their throats. We're at them on social media now. It's a beautiful place, but it's a cancerous, poisonous place as well. And all of these players have made the point, coming back to your question, a World Cup every 2 years, what does it serve? It serves FIFA, yes. They'll dress it up that it serves the fans. But to my knowledge, there's not one fan that is walking around asking for a World Cup every 2 years. It's sacrosanct. It is. The beauty of the World Cup is it's every 4 years. The level of interest, the fact that I'm sitting on this seminar with you now is because it's finally here. And for that to change, there's an old saying, isn't there? If it's not broken, don't fix it. And then when it comes to the FIFA World Cup, the players don't want it. There's no massive appetite from the fans. FIFA wants it. And I've often said this, FIFA, the amazing thing with football, this is that it is the global game. And yet two of the most powerful entities we're not even discussing over the course of the next 4 weeks, China and India. And that's the next kind of, conquest of FIFA's. They want, the sooner they can get those two powerhouses to the table, the top table of world football, the better, because that's the opening of yet more riches, lavishes of riches. And yeah, they won't stop until they get there. Hence, I mean, we probably won't touch on it on this seminar, Caitlin, but even the idea of a 48-nation World Cup in 2026, we probably don't have long enough for me to bang the drum on that. But I find even that is not, and in my opinion, is not a great idea. But that's maybe a discussion for another day.
Well, it brings, I'm going to go to UNC next, but it brings to my mind the question, are sports journalists doing enough to talk about sustainability in football? I mean,
yeah, again, it's a hot topic. It is a hot topic. I go back to Graham Potter, a man, again, as I say, I know well. He was actually asked this quite recently, the Chelsea manager. And to my knowledge, certainly in the Premier League, the first manager to say, yeah, we aren't doing enough. We need to look at our carbon emissions. Again, there's been instances where I think Arsenal Football Club, if memory serves me correct, had a game against Norwich, which, again, you're all based in England, so you probably have better geography than I do. Norwich is down in East Anglia, if I'm not mistaken, and they're taking a 15-minute flight. I mean, that's just, to me, come on. I know you earn 100 grand a week, but you can all get on a bus. You can. I just find it ludicrous. I think that's the next big thing. And there are pockets. Forest Green Rovers is a great story. Again, I won't bore you with the details on that. You can look that up in your own time. They're a club that want to be increasingly more green, increasingly more sustainable. But I do think that is the next vanguard, if you will. That's the next area that Gianni and his, I'll call them mob, might take a little look at. There's what more can be done. How can football and sustainability and getting our message across kind of get a little bit more aligned, because there is no doubt. And listen, in fairness to Qatar, a lot of the stadiums that have been built, there is a kind of a legacy to them. There's a sustainable kind of element in nature to them. So that will, again, only time will tell if they're true to their word on those builds and where those materials end up. We'll have to hold them to that. But yeah, there is no doubt, Caitlin, the short answer to your question is sustainability. It is an issue. It's getting increasingly covered, and it's an area that I'm sure will be looked at in a lot more detail in the coming months and years.
Is it something you think about with your coverage?
Honestly, I must admit, it's not front and centre, being truthful. It isn't. I'd be lying if I said it was. Yeah, I mean, we all can do our bit. I like to think that I do my bit. I actually don't drive. I'm a 36-year-old man that doesn't drive. I get ferried around, so we make sure there's carpools. So that's me doing my little tiny little bit for the environment, Caitlin. But in all seriousness, though, yeah, I've got to be honest. I probably don't give it more. I probably don't give it enough thought than I should. I'll be honest on that front.
Thank you for your honesty. I now have questions coming in thick and fast, and we're not by a long shot going to have a chance to get to them all. But
as many as you can.
Let's do a quick fire round. Timmy Tope says, if you're a woman, and particularly if you're a woman of color, how do you get a foot up? How do you become a sports journalist? How do you crack the industry?
Oh, that is a great question. Yeah, listen, I'd like to think, and again, it's maybe I'm a little bit wet behind the ears and perhaps a little bit too naive, but in this day and age, you put in the hard work. There's no substitute for that. If you are a woman of color, that you have to have, first brass tacks, you need the qualifications, right? So you work blooming hard to ensure that you've got the qualifications. And then, like any good journalist, and I like to think I had a bit of this in me, and it came from my upbringing, you're a bull in a china shop. You do not accept the answer no. So yeah, listen, I know, and I certainly wasn't in a position, working class family, single mother as my mum was. You have to put yourself out there, though. You've got to do the jobs that you think, it's not really where I want to be, but you do it. You do it to gain the experience. You do it to gain the respect of your peers. And, very quickly, certainly in this part of the world, again, I've rolled out a lot of cliches today, and I apologize for that. I'm a bit cheesy when it comes to that, but, sometimes it's not what you know, it's who you know. And again, a good journalist is only as good as his contact book. So you work bloody hard. You put yourself front and centre. You send email after email. There's some good journalists in this world. I'll never forget Neil Custis at The Sun. I was a young little whippersnapper. Again, I appreciate I'm not a woman of colour, but he wasn't to know what I was. I think I could have been Christina rather than Chris, but I sent him an email, and fair play to him. Within 3 days, he took the time out, gave me a tiny little bit of advice, and I've actually never met Neil to thank him for that. And it's those little bits and pieces across this. But you work hard. You literally, if you want it enough, and again, a lot of people might shake their head at this, but there is a belief in me that does. If you want it hard enough, and by that, if you sit and you send your emails out there and you get out there and you go to matches, you doorstop, you're almost in a lot of ways what you're attaining or what you're aspiring to be. You actually have to straight away do it to get there. Does that make sense? I'm hoping I'm getting a few nods here. Where if you dream of being a journalist, be a journalist straight off the bat to try and get your opportunities and work those contacts and keep pestering until someone caves in. And that would be, again, maybe a bit foolhardy. And I appreciate there are a number of challenges. If you are, a female, of colour, there are other challenges that I'm perhaps not touching on, but old school first and foremost, and see where that takes you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to rapid fire a couple of these for you. Do you think sportsmen from particular countries should be banned because of the decisions that leaders and politicians make in their countries?
Oh, wow. Of course, that is, I take it, in reference to what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. I can understand it. I truly can. In the case of what we've seen, and again, tennis is a great example. I know Wimbledon came in for a lot of abuse for essentially banning Belarusian and Russian athletes. I think it depends how much we want to hold, leaders accountable. At the end of the day, again, I don't want to sit here and get political. I'm not a politician, and I certainly don't pretend to be one. But I put it like this: I can understand why some sporting entities would make that decision. And whilst I appreciate that will be universally, there'll be a lot of people, I'm sure, in that room and watching on that don't necessarily agree with that. I can understand it. I truly can. We want to live in a fair and balanced world. Of course we do. There's no one on this planet that wouldn't want that. And yeah, sometimes sporting entities deem it necessary to take those steps for the good of society and the good of the world, and that's their decisions to make, and we've got to respect that. Yes, we can challenge it, but ultimately they will make their decisions, and ultimately, whether you like it or not, you have to respect it.
Yeah. Question from Johnny, Northern Ireland. How much of a culture shock should fans expect when they arrive in Qatar?
Oh yes, yeah, pack the factor 50 for a start, and it may be November, December. I mean, I would say this, and in all seriousness on this, I've lived here 12 years, United Arab Emirates that is, and this November is unseasonably hot. I mean, I'm in a suit today. You don't want to see this as a sky blue shirt. You don't want to see what's under here today, that's for sure. But yeah, 35 degrees, I think it is today. So again, if you're interested in the football aspect, I think the South American clubs, and expect an African nation, I say clubs, country, an African nation to do well. It's the nations that are used to the stifling heat because it is unseasonably warm. So culture shock wise, yeah, the heat is something, but embrace it. Brazil was a culture shock for me. Russia to a point was a culture shock, and you go there, have your eyes open, and just enjoy it, land, and we're all journalists here. Just embrace it. I come back to it, embrace it, poke your head in and get into the shops, get into the museums, have those conversations with locals, people around the world. And then, only then, in the fullness of time, in the fullness of your experience in Qatar, can you then truly go away and then come up with your conclusion as to your experience and the country. And I'm telling you now, I will say this to you all, Qatar in the Middle East, if you haven't been, it will surprise you in the positive more than it will in the negative. I do believe that.
This has been a brilliant conversation, because I don't think I've necessarily appreciated the complexity required of a sports journalist in terms of grasping the politics, grasping the finance and the financial aspects and mismanagement by FIFA, alleged. And now also understanding climate change and sustainability, and it's not an easy job. You guys always seem to be having the most fun in the corner, very loud, but it's not an easy job. So my hats are off to you 100%. I can't let you go, Chris, without asking. You're a Scotsman. We've got Wales and England playing in this World Cup. Who are you cheering for?
Well, I'll give you an idea on this. I thought it would be Scotland. At least I was hoping it was going to be Scotland. So I'm actually over there for England, Wales. And I don't know if you've got any Welsh viewers in, so I apologise for what I'm going to say here. But Omar Rahid, Omar Rahid, which Michael Sheen has gone viral. The actor's gone viral. There's a big chant. I will be supporting. Yeah, he's amazing, Michael Sheen. Easy to see. If I'm quoting Omar Rahid, it means I'll absolutely be with the Welsh.
Go the Dragons?
Yeah, go the Dragons and go the Welsh or whatever it is. But yeah, it's fair to say, and there'll be one or two thinking, you tiny, you petty Scotsman. But yeah, anyone, and I won't apologise for saying this, anyone but England to win the World Cup.
Oh, you got applause downstairs.
Yeah.
And no bets, of course, but any tips on it?
I think, listen, everyone's talking about Argentina. They're 35 matches unbeaten. Lionel Scaloni's done an incredible job. Copa America winners in 2019. They have the pint-sized genius as well, Lionel Messi. It would be a wonderful exclamation mark on his career. I think we all, maybe not the Ronaldo kind of sympathisers out there, but if Messi in Argentina were to win it, it would just be, he deserves it. He is the greatest player, in my opinion, we've ever seen. The things he can do on a football field. So Argentina, yes, I must say, I do think it will come out of Argentina or Brazil. One of those nations will emerge victorious come December 18th, 2022. I'm looking forward to it.
Chris, you're a champ. Good luck out there.
Thank you.
Don't forget your sunscreen, and we'll be watching.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys as well. My Scottish accent's a bit thick, so I apologise if maybe one or two of you might have needed some translation there, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully you've taken something from it. And yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Caitlin.
Come back soon.
Thank you.
When's that bet?
Thanks.